Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Just a couple of notes before we get going. Before we start, I want to congratulate our international news gathering organization, which today was awarded 4 honors from the Association for International Broadcasting, 4 AIB awards. And I just want to note them. One for our continuing news reporting on the Hong Kong protests. The judges noted our investigative depth, exceptional photography, and passionate correspondence who kept the audience gripped. We won 2 AIB awards for our coverage of the abuse and scandal in the Catholic Church, the case of the predator priest by Nema Alvagar, and our documentary group. We won for investigative documentary for TV and video. The judges called it dynamic and thoroughly researched. And we also won the AIB's Impact Award for that. We also won for Young Journalist of the Year for Yang Xiang in our Beijing bureau. Yang was chosen from a field of impressive candidates for, quote, his strong journalism and storytelling skills combined with the ability to manage a news team. So a very warm congratulations to Yang and to everybody associated with all of this reporting. Congratulations. I'm going to start today with coronavirus, and then we'll turn our attention to Washington. So Matthew, it's all yours.
Thanks, Jeff. So restrictions around America are coming back in a big way as the virus just runs rampant the week before Thanksgiving. To get a sense of what may be ahead this week, Mondays are underreported days typically. Even yesterday, Monday, recorded 166,000 cases, the third highest of any day. So that's 2 straight weeks now, over 100,000 daily. Hospitalization numbers are huge. 73,000 Americans now in the hospital, thousands more than that April peak. And then in terms of deaths, almost 1,000 reported yesterday. The average over 1,100 as Biden warns more people may die if the current administration keeps blocking the transition, that his team needs access to the administration's vaccine distribution plan. Positivity rate, highlighting this for the first time in a few days. The U.S. average positivity rate is now 10%, unheard of since the spring. And of course, that's an average across America. You've heard about 50% or more in some places. So an indicator this is going to get even worse. And then on the flip side, all of the optimism and hope around vaccines, the celebrations around Moderna's results claiming almost 95% effectiveness, and news that the vaccine has strong results against severe disease and in communities of color, and Fauci echoing the fears of others that people must not let up safety measures, even with vaccines on the way. He says the cavalry is coming, but the cavalry is not here yet. Looking around the map at the regions and the restrictions, California calling it pulling the emergency brake, and other states and cities are pumping the brakes too. We have a large roster of CNN reporters spread out across the U.S. covering this today. Let me start in California, hitting a record, seeing cases of 50% in the past week, dramatically reversing reopenings, now including 37 million people, which is nearly everyone, in that strictest tier of California restrictions, meaning many businesses must close or severely cut back. Iowa finally issued a mask mandate after the governor spent months belittling the idea. There is, of course, the new CDC data revealing that rural Americans are dying at almost 3.5 times the rate of those in metro areas. We capture this crisis in a small hospital on the Iowa-Minnesota border in Howard County, Iowa. Miguel Marquez turning that piece for the lead and for EBOS. And we are working on a digital piece kind of noting and calling out really just a few states left that have no mask mandate. Pennsylvania, Philadelphia ramping up restrictions in a big way. No indoor gatherings in private or public. No indoor dining, limits to outdoor dining. New Jersey cracking down on crowd limits. Ohio's governor specifically calling out rampant spread from banquets and wedding receptions and social gatherings following funerals. He says it's not the ceremonies, It's the party afterwards as he implements new restrictions on food service and dancing and seating. St. Louis hospitals warning they will run out of capacity in early December at this rate. Illinois averaging 6 times the daily case rates as September as it enters this 30-day stay-at-home advisory. Adrian Broadus up in Chicago. Lucy Kavanaugh turning a piece for Dayside in South Dakota with the highest rise in 7-day average case rates in the country. Omar Jimenez up since this morning in El Paso, which is a disaster, obviously, and Martin Savage in that hard-hit Navajo Nation, which implemented a 3-week stay-at-home lockdown last night. On the education front, New York City schools open again today. It's obviously a day-by-day decision process. We've got Fairfax County, Virginia, suburban D.C., further delaying in-person learning moves and beyond on the education front. From health on vaccines and developments there, distribution, other health headlines, the next steps on the vaccine, the CDC Vaccine Advisory Committee meeting Monday now to decide who gets priority. We are, of course, awaiting FDA authorization on Pfizer and Moderna. Could be days, could be weeks. Pfizer now tells us they will test vaccine distribution in 4 states, Rhode Island, Texas, New Mexico, and Tennessee. They have not specified what testing distribution means, only that those states won't get earlier doses for real than others. I know International will talk about that great exclusive Fred Pleitgen show and tell of the dry ice shipping process, the BioNTech side of Pfizer in Germany. We'll hear from Fauci at 11:30, the American Heart Association, talking about COVID and cardiovascular disease. And we've got Sanjay and Elizabeth available through the day. And we continue to see a notable list of impacts on sports from COVID. Obviously, yesterday came news that the NCAA was planning for all of March Madness in one city, in Indianapolis. We've got 5th-ranked Texas A&M postponing a game for the 2nd straight week. Miami won't be playing for a while. No fans this weekend in Baltimore or Philadelphia. The wrap pieces today are Nick Watt for 3, 5, 7, 9, Alex Field for 4, 6, 8, and 10.
Okay, Matthew, thank you. I do think the incredible trend of the Republican governors doing about faces on the masks and the restrictions is quite a good story in particular. And we'll hear from Fauci at 11:30, but we're also hearing from him right now. He's on CNN right now as well. And thanks to Marty Savage and that team on the Navajo piece, which I think was really important to tell. Anybody have any thoughts on COVID before we move to Washington?
Jeff, it's Liza. I'm wondering if South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem deserves a TV piece. I saw that Crystal Liza had done something on digital. You know, AP has a story today about governors' actions. She appears to be the only governor in the United States who's not taken a single measure. And we've had these incredible interviews with South Dakota nurses and doctors the last couple of days on a new day. And she has said a number of outrageous things. She's just unique.
I think it's a really, really good idea. So, Washington, I'd like to do that.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really good idea. Anyone else? Thank you for that, Liza. Anyone else? Okay, there's a ton going on in Washington, so let's move to Washington, please.
Okay, so 64 days left, and we are now day 10 with nothing on the president's schedule. Kevin was tagging Caitlin, answering some of the questions you raised yesterday about what's going on in there. There is nothing on his schedule. There was a conversation about adding things, but he's in such a bad mood, no one wants to go near him. He's spending hours watching TV. He's up in the residence and then comes down to the Oval in the evening. And we, yet again, don't see him today. So he is in there. At the same time, on the voting front, we have this Georgia recount that continues. The Secretary of State making this incredible statement about Republicans, including Lindsey Graham, pressuring him to find ways to exclude ballots. Important to remember that this recount is over tomorrow and will have to be certified by Friday, and there is no indication that anything will change. As the legal moves are disintegrating before everyone's eyes, the president sticking with his conspiracy theories, but, these cases being dropped right and left. This fight in the Oval Office with Rudy and his lawyers, Rudy calling the campaign lawyers liars and the campaign lawyers firing back at him, but none of that going anywhere. In terms of COVID relief, it's important, this is not going anywhere, and just sort of this broader picture of all of these safety nets that have been put in place to deal with people during COVID, things like the unemployment extension, the eviction moratorium, state and local, there's just a bunch of them all expiring, and just absolutely no relief in sight, and that is going to become an increasing problem. Sarah Murray is reporting out, and we'll have her later today, this whole question of how much credit does Trump get for this. The basic bottom line is that he wasn't involved in the details, but his and actually may have hindered it because he has made the vaccine so political. But it was his administration that put Operation Warp Speed in place and supported it. Also to note that Bright on GMA this morning saying the real credit goes to the Obama administration because they were the one that laid the seeds for this before COVID even came about. There's this new post reporting about Republican leaders and how they're alarmed about the Georgia race and consider Trump a political burden. This, as they yet again will not stand up and try to move him in any way. They're on the Hill today for policy lunches, so we'll see. We'll get a sense of if there's any movement, but again, there has been none so far. And I think that is it on the Trump side of it. Trump Hill.
Okay. All right. Before we move, let's go ahead. David Chalian, anything you want to add, politics side?
Sure. In the 2 p.m. hour today, we're going to see Joe Biden and Kamala Harris a picture getting a defense, diplomatic, intelligence briefing. Now, this is a picture as much about what it is that they're doing that is as it is about what the briefing that they're not getting is, which is an actual PDB and intel briefing from the current experts who have that information. This is friendly allies from the diplomatic intelligence and defense world briefing Biden and Harris on the state of affairs. We don't expect them to speak, but it is going to be that picture, and clearly it is both aimed at showing Joe Biden on the job, or on the job he is soon to take over, while Donald Trump is not apparently on the job that he currently has, but it is also to show the briefings that they're not getting. We're going to get some staff announcements out of the transition today in some of the reporting you saw that we had last night. Cedric Richmond, the congressman from Louisiana, he's holding a presser at 10:45 a.m. Eastern this morning about his future. He's going into the administration as a counselor role and public engagement. Jen O'Malley Dillon, the campaign manager, going in. We may hear about Steve Ricchetti, longtime Biden advisor, who's been a senior advisor on this campaign to him. So Biden continues to build out his upper echelon of his West Wing staff. And you saw that NBC story about Biden not wanting his administration consumed with Trump investigations. Just a reminder from Arlette that in May, he was asked in an interview with Lawrence O'Donnell on MSNBC if he would pull forward and pardon Trump as a sign of unity, and he indicated that he wouldn't, and said he would commit to the rule that no one person is above the law and that DOJ must act independently. But again, this notion that perhaps he just doesn't want his administration distracted with Trump investigations. And then I just think the Georgia runoff stuff continues to be really interesting, with both of these races are sort of emerging now as this sort of proxy battle of Trump versus Biden. We know that Biden has indicated he's wanting to go down there and campaign. John Ossoff launches a new ad today, completely embracing Biden on the issue of working with him to beat the coronavirus. Ossoff's entire campaign is about COVID management and the mismanagement from Trump and Purdue and what have you. This, as that call in the Washington Post to donors comes out about Republicans expressing some concern about Trump's continued refusal to acknowledge reality and how that may end up impacting those races down there. So that stuff we have as well. We can attribute that call to the Post, and I think that's where we start, Jeff.
Okay, great. Thank you, David. Just a couple of thoughts from me before I open it up for everybody, in no particular order. I really think that this Lindsey Graham story that, we've covered incredibly well, starting with Wolf's interview with the Secretary of State yesterday on Sit Room, and then we covered the story through the night last night and again this morning. So this is not suggesting that we haven't covered it well. We have. But having said that, I think this guy needs to be continued to be called out. He is the head of the Judiciary Committee, and whether it was an overt threat or an implied threat, it is beyond the pale. The Republican Secretary of State, who wants Donald Trump to win, has absolutely no reason to lie about this. And Lindsey Graham, and I think actually, frankly, if we've made any mistake, it's that our banners have been too polite, and we need to go well after Lindsey Graham. I also think Sherrod Brown would be a good guest. Ted Cruz, a sitting U.S. senator, calling another U.S. senator on Twitter an ass. Ted Cruz said that Sherrod Brown is being a complete ass because he asked for Dan Sullivan, the senator from Alaska, to wear a mask in the Senate chamber. Now, look, he was pretty far away. I think he was referring to other staffers, but the fact that Ted Cruz called a colleague, a U.S. senator, being an ass, I think should also really be called out. I do think another day with no public events for Trump is significant, and it's part of the whole sulking story. But at the same time, it's becoming quite clear what Donald Trump's scorched earth policy is, and it's crystallizing about the Afghan-Iraq troop withdrawal, making the inquiry about an attack on Iran, auctioning off the Arctic refuge, trying to corner Biden on China policy, purging and installing civil servants who cannot be fired easily. I do think there's a whole story in what Trump is doing here in his scorched earth policy. I have two other observations on the political side. Former NFL star Burgess Owens winning the old Mia Love seat in Utah, I think is an interesting story and part of the continuing Republican march in the House. There's no arguing now that let's wait to see what happens, and maybe the blue wave comes a week or two later after Election Day. The House is going to be uncomfortably close for the Democrats, and Burgess Owens, I think, is another good example of that, and he's a good story. And then finally, I think there's a story to be done, at least on digital, if not also on television. We saw this in primaries, certainly in New York. But why are they still counting votes in New York and California? I know it's historical, but why are the processes so bad in New York, especially in New York City and California, that the counting is still not done? Not recounts, but counting. And it should really be called out and why these systems haven't been fixed. And I really would like to understand why that is still not the case. Those are some thoughts from me. Let's open it up for anyone else.
if anybody is looking to do that New York vote counting story, the Times did a great investigation of the Board of Elections like a month ago or 2 months ago because of the primary mess. That explains the whole thing, the history of it, what's wrong with it, how corrupt it is, how broken it is. It's a mess. It's like a huge nepotistic organization where there's no accountability because the Democrats never lose a vote, so they don't really give a shit about getting things done. It's a mess.
Hey, Jeff, it's David. I'm just curious if you think it's worth doing a little bit of a bio or backgrounder about who Brad Raffensperger is, where he come from, what's he all about. He's going to be in news a lot from now to January 5th.
Yeah, I totally think we should. Absolutely.
Yeah, we have that, and we're looking at that.
Okay, let's do that. Good idea.
Hey, Jeff, it's Marcus. Just interested in voices and probably commentary, punditry on kind of why America doesn't have a choice. We have a president who chooses not to transition. Like other countries, I don't think, are faced with this kind of thing where just because the chief executive decides I'm going to be a baby, the country doesn't get to transition. It's kind of extraordinarily terrible governance, obviously. But I'm just interested in like voices on why do we have no choice? Why can no one make this guy do what's right for the country and the world? It's kind of mind-boggling if you step back and look at it. So I'm just curious. I think many of our users are curious too on why we don't have a choice, why we're stuck with this. It's just interesting for users.
I do think that we could, again, and we've done it, but, writing about and profiling the GSA woman who some are saying is positioning herself for a post-Trump world position because it's in her hands. Other thoughts? Anyone else? Okay. I really, really want to take on Lindsey Graham on his behavior here, and I think Ted Cruz needs to be called out as well, and Trump's scorched earth to-do list. All of these, I think, are really important. Profiles of Kristi Noem, profiles of the Georgia Secretary of State, making sure we are all over the Georgia Senate races as we have been, as David Challingham pointed out. Sarah Murray on the vaccines is a really important story. I really think we should do something on Burgess Owens and what is going on in the House and the pressure that is clearly going to be on Nancy Pelosi. Okay. Anything else in domestic?
Just a couple of quick notes. The policing beat team reporting out a few controversial shootings, and I just want to surface this one, that there is just remarkably little info still, days and days later, after the fatal shooting of two black teens by at least one deputy in Brevard County, Florida. Families say police have told them nothing. Ben Crump is representing the families. A lot of blanks to fill in here, and the policing and national teams reporting this out. There is a sentencing for two more in the college admissions scandal, Diane and Todd Blake this afternoon. And, of course, the really cool docking of the SpaceX Crew Dragon with the space station that we covered this morning and all that goes with that. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else in Washington?
Yeah, just to mention, there's another hearing today in front of Senate Judiciary where Dorsey and Zuckerberg will be. This is on censorship suppression in the 2020 election. And then you mentioned these national security threats, but just we had this great reporting yesterday by Barbara on Afghanistan, and this with the New York Times reporting the contemplated Iran strike. Just for planning purposes, we are going to see Miller at 10:45. So presumably that's about Afghanistan, but we're not 100% sure yet. And that's what I got.
Okay, thank you very much. International.
Hi, Jeff. So just on Afghanistan and Iran, on those two stories, we've got Sam Kiley also available to play into that, and these foreign policy decisions that could obviously be very difficult to reverse and have major international consequences. But our focus continues to be COVID, very much in the US. We're using all the correspondents who are based in these hotspots, which is great for us. And then a few international angles there. Matthew flagged Fred Pleitgen's really good reporting. He's at Frankfurt Airport, where he's had access to Lufthansa's unit for transport, vaccine transport. He's had access to this dried ice container and logistics hub. Great live shot and walk and talk, and he's going to package that later. And also Phil Blackers in Sweden, where they're completely backtracking on their very relaxed kind of policy that they had months ago, introducing more restrictions, limiting the size of public gatherings, etc. So we've got good coverage on that. And then finally, Hurricane Iota, Patrick Ottman is on this. It hit Nicaragua 15 miles from the area that was completely devastated by ETA. 40,000 people evacuated. So we're covering that as well.
Okay. Thank you. Business.
Jeff, good morning. U.S. stock futures are slipping this morning despite the promising news on a vaccine and the warning of a long winter and how it's going to be an incredibly difficult time for the U.S. economy. Biden mentioned this yesterday during his remarks that futures down about 200 points. Yesterday, he also seemed to throw support behind House Democrats' $3.4 trillion stimulus plan, despite the fact that Senator Richard Shelby, the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, dismissed those chances. What is clear is that he is not shying away from a fight with Republicans who back a skinnier deal. And obviously, we know the data on stimulus has worked. It will continue to work, but we don't have it. And, each day we don't have it, it could be pushing the economy back into a hole. Evidence of that this morning is we got retail sales, which shows that the U.S. consumer perhaps retrenching on spending, not a good sign heading into the holiday season for the U.S. economy. Julia Chatterley has been up on this morning, and Christina Alessi is available throughout Dayside. Sticking with the Hill, Ted and Manu reporting that retiring Republican Senator Lamar Alexander announcing he will oppose the president's controversial Fed Reserve nominee, Judy Shelton, who's expected to get a confirmation vote this week on the floor, joining other senators Romney and Collins. If she is confirmed, though, she will be on track to clear the hurdle with the fewest votes of any governor since at least 1980. Manu and Ted are all over that. And of course, as Virginia mentioned, all eyes on today's tech hearing, where Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg and Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey will be virtually back on the Hill at 10 a.m. It is the second time in 2 months that they have testified with regard to the role their companies had in the recent election. They're going to obviously face questions on how the social media companies handled posts, videos, and photos. Both companies increasing the labeling of election misinformation. Clearly, Twitter doing that far more than Facebook. Brian Fung is tracking that and available and feeding alerts into the DLE on CNN Business, and that is where we begin.
Okay. Before we move to digital, is there anything else anybody wants to bring up? Okay, digital.
Hey, good morning. 34 million uniques yesterday. Collinson, plus the withdrawal of the election lawsuits that really never got any traction in the first place, plus the Moderna vaccine news were at the top of the list for another strong day. The top video across all three main platforms yesterday, desktop, mobile web, and app, was Camerata with the nurse who relayed her shock at what many COVID patients are saying on their deathbed. It's kind of been denial about all of it. And that was for that to be the number one video with really big numbers across all three platforms, it really resonated. This morning, Collinson at number one, as he so often is, 17,000 concurrents on Trump is demanding credit as he refuses to cooperate, how Trump is actively working to sabotage his successor, and U.S. lives are on the line. The Georgia Secretary of State saying Lindsey Graham implied he should throw away ballots is number two. So we are on that. We will stay on it, and there's audience interest in it. Thanksgiving and COVID, a negative test result doesn't mean it's safe to visit family. This is our number three story, and it is a signal from audiences that as the Thanksgiving holiday gets closer and closer, people are looking for information to make the choices they need to make about gathering. So we're going to keep all of that work up and out. The Virginia Wesleyan dean resigning after an alleged Facebook post called Biden voters anti-American and anti-Christian is in our top five, as is Stanford distancing itself from Atlas. The top video this morning is Pam Brown's reporting on AC last night. Here are the details of the contentious Oval Office Giuliani phone call. A handful of other things on COVID, in addition to the main bar and the DLE that captures much of what Matthew touched on and more. We've got a great piece from Nicole Chavez on COVID. It's sending Black, Latino, and Native American people to the hospital at about 4 times the rate of others. We have a standalone piece on just South Dakota, grappling with the nation's highest positivity rate. As Liza said, we've got the good Saliza piece on WTF, the governor. The inmates in El Paso who will be moving bodies of victims, California reimposing restrictions on 40 counties, and then, extending outside of the U.S., this great Matthew Chance exclusive on how bad is Russia's COVID crisis. Packed morgues and excess deaths tell a very dark story. And then Luke McGee in London has a good piece on is Boris Johnson's Downing Street turning into a COVID hotspot. So you can just kind of look at the rundown of COVID stories we have today and go around the globe, and it's really powerful. We also have a Q&A on the vaccines and a new explainer on positivity rates. 2 weeks after the election, far-right TV shows are providing false hope to Trump fans. This is Stelter on our sites and in last night's Reliable newsletter, diving into what is being said on Newsmax and on One America. And it's, he goes into the details and watches it so we don't have to. And it's disturbing and outrageous. And so we're going to keep on playing that up. And remember, we still have our Misinfo Watch blog as well. Harry Enton is very smart today on Trump's fraud accusations, making no sense. It's the suburbs, not the cities. That's why he lost. And Harry breaks that down. We had a good discussion this morning, Kathy, Rachel, and others on not driving past the story on Congresswoman-elect Cori Bush being understandably shocked by Republicans calling her Breonna because she wore her Breonna Taylor mask. So we're going to keep that up and out. The looming expiration of student loan relief leaves Biden a choice. Keep Trump's policy or go bigger. This is a Katie Labasco service piece, and it's really good to hit the student loan relief topic. 3 other things not squarely on COVID. Richard mentioned the judiciary hearing today in the Senate. So with Zuckerberg and Dorsey, we are live streaming that on digital, and we are DLEing that as well in business. Coming from the race and equality team, a piece from Nicole Chavez on Philadelphia is the latest city to reckon with and apologize for a past racial atrocity, but experts say such gestures don't actually break ground on actual reform. The words, but not actions, that there's very little impact there. And then lastly, on climate, Greenland's glaciers could lose even more ice than originally thought. This is an 11 a.m. embargo. The study and story will outline new disturbing news for global sea level rise. That's it.
Okay. Thank you very much. John?
Good morning, Jeff. So coronavirus is again in the top spot. And as you mentioned, Jim Sciutto just did an interview with Dr. Fauci where he hit on a number of topics, reinforcing masks, saying he doesn't think there's need for a national lockdown. He thinks a lot of schools can remain open. It's a local decision, but by far the most important thing he discussed was building on the Biden comments from yesterday about the transition process and really underscoring just how important it is that a smooth transition process happens now in order to manage COVID over the next few months going into January and February. And he says it's just vitally important that the task force and public health officials have the opportunity to talk to Biden and his team now. So that's the part we're playing up. And all of this is feeds into what we're seeing across the nation. We have our reporters again and all the hot spots on the hospitalizations and the restrictions that are going hand in hand. The Lucy Kaffenoff piece out of South Dakota is airing right now. We'll air it again this afternoon, just showing the real issues that are happening inside that state. Omar Jimenez in El Paso, Adrian Broadus in Chicago, Miguel Marquez, we're going to get up this afternoon from Iowa ahead of his piece, which is going to be airing later on today. And then Nick Watt, the rap piece from Los Angeles that airs at 3 o'clock. Sanjay Gupta and Elizabeth Cohen stay on just the frightening trends in this country, as well as Pfizer testing COVID distribution in 4 states. And what does that mean for the rollout? We have the head of public health in Harris County joining us next hour.
Susan Bailey from the president of the American Medical Association with Kate, the Kansas City mayor coming up today at noon, putting in his own restrictions. Obviously, one of the areas really hard hit there in the western part of Missouri. Breonna going forward to the New York sheriff's defying Cuomo about trying to keep things under control during Thanksgiving and restricting how many people get together. And Breonna Show will be doing a takeout on the South Dakota governor. Martin Savage's piece will get another run today, and then we're going to do a live interview with Poppy Will with the Navajo Nation president, Jonathan Nez, on just the real issues they're facing. We'll hit all the international stories, including Matthew Chance reporting out of Russia. That was a really strong piece. We want to give that another run. On transition, it's Jessica Dean and Jeff Zeleny out of Wilmington, watching for the staffing announcements should be happening on 10:45. As well as that national security briefing during the 2 o'clock hour, obviously with their own consortium of people that had to put together since they can't go through official channels. Caitlin Collins at the White House underscoring the fact that, once again, we're not seeing Trump again. Mine and Roger on the Hill. There is a Senate policy lunch today, just past noon. We'll see if we can get any of the GOP lawmakers on transition then. And then Barbara Starr and General Wesley Clark on all the Pentagon news. Virginia mentioned the 10:45 briefing by Acting Defense Secretary Miller. It looks like that's now been pushed possibly to 2 o'clock. Still waiting to get more specifics on that. We have a number of former administration members to talk about the transition issues. Kate has Jim Messina. Breonna has Brett Bruen, former White House Director of Global Engagement, and Brooke today has Robert Malley, former NSC member under the Obama administration. All shows will hit the Graham storyline. We just had Abby Phillip from Utilities on it, and we'll going for other bookings throughout the day to call that out. And finally, one of the stories we are watching is the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing with Dorsey and Zuckerberg testifying. We'll wait and see what news is made out of there, and we'll get Brian Chung up around it if it cuts through.
Okay. Thank you. Washington.
Good morning. We've got Arlette on Biden. We'll get the staffing news, the briefing today. Jeremy's doing Trump. Among our analysts, Jackie Kucinich, Abby Phillip. We will also cover Lindsey Graham, Ted Cruz. Erica has our coronavirus wrap, and we've got Sanjay. And Miguel is looking at hospitals on the front line in Iowa, overwhelmed, and we're booking a local emergency room doc as well there. And we will get our international reporters in as well today.
And in the Situation Room, we'll be following these continuing trends as COVID is running rampant, the return of restrictions nationwide, the surging positivity rate, hospitalizations, cases, and deaths. And we'll follow on the effectiveness of these new vaccines and distribution. We'll also see what else Fauci has to say later today. We do have Dr. Francis Collins booked from NIH, and we have the Sarah Murray piece mentioned on how much credit does Trump get for these vaccines. We'll also have the Watt and Field wrap pieces. We'll be following on the transition. We'll watch the Biden-Harris national security briefing event this afternoon. All of this as Trump has nothing on his schedule. All of his legal disputes disintegrating. We'll definitely follow our interview from yesterday with the Georgia Secretary of State and really call Lindsey Graham out over all of this. And we'll follow on the Sherrod Brown incident from yesterday, Ted Cruz calling him an ass. And we'll continue to look at Trump's scorched earth policy. What is he after these calls on Afghanistan, the Arctic Refuge, Iran, and China? And we'll watch to see, we'll follow on this Washington Post reporting about these growing concerns among Republicans and Trump's refusal to acknowledge reality. And that's where we're starting.
Okay. Thank you, Emily. Does anybody else have anything they want to bring up? Okay. Before we go, I want to also note continuing success across all of our digital properties. October was the best October in history for CNN Digital, and CNN Digital remained far and away, not even close, the number one digital news source for global, mobile, video, politics, and millennial users. And that, of course, continues here in November as well. So digital continues to shine, as do all of our platforms. There's a ton going on. Let's stay strong. Let's stay newsy. Let's stay urgent. Let's be smart. There is a lot of news out there, and Lindsey Graham really deserves it. Have a good day, everybody. Bye-bye.